Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering woke meltdown as judges refuse to hire college protesters. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from the Washington Free Beacon, 13 federal judges say they will no longer hire law clerks from Columbia University, citing virulent spread of anti-Semitism and explosion of student disruptions. From the Daily Wire, 13 federal judges, we won't hire Columbia University students unless serious consequences for protesters and significant changes in faculty. And from Above the Law, federal judges say they won't hire from Columbia, leveraging their public offices to bully an institution they don't like. Above the Law is woke, and they're very upset about this new development because this is damaging to the careers for any students who went to Columbia University. It really discredits anyone with a Columbia degree. First, so it's clear what a law clerk actually does working for a federal judge. And while it varies from court to court, here's basically what they do. They conduct legal research. They proof and edit opinions written by the judge. They write memoranda. They draft opinions for discussion with the judge. They check citations for accuracy. And they discuss opinions with the judge. So it's a very intimate relationship with a judge. And if a judge is not comfortable working with you, they're not going to want you in their courtroom or around their other clerks. Having the opportunity to clerk for a federal judge is a big deal. It's great experience, and it shows that a young attorney has an understanding of how things actually work in the court, the interior process, perhaps has some relationship with at least one of the judges. And it's a great item on a resume to join a law firm, especially a prestigious law firm. But not for Columbia students, because at least with these 13 judges, they're getting blocked. From the Washington Free Beacon, 13 federal judges say they will no longer hire law clerks from Columbia University. 13 federal judges said Monday they would no longer hire law clerks from Columbia College or Columbia Law School after the university allowed an encampment on its lawn to spiral into a destructive occupation of a campus building. The judges cited an explosion of student disruptions and the virulent spread of anti-Semitism at Columbia, which has now canceled its main graduation ceremony because of the unrest. And when we say virulent, we mean this: extremely poisonous or venomous, full of malice, malignant. Virulent is definitely not a compliment. Led by appellate judges James Ho and Elizabeth Branch, who spearheaded a clerkship boycott of Yale Law School in 2022 and Stanford Law School in 2023, as well as by Matthew Solomon on the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, the judges wrote in a letter to Columbia President Minouche Shafik that they would no longer hire anyone who joins the Columbia University community, whether as undergraduates or as law students, beginning with the entering class of 2024. Quote, freedom of speech protects protest, and certainly not acts or threats of violence or terrorism, the judges wrote. It has become clear that Columbia applies double standards when it comes to free speech and student misconduct. So all 13 judges signed off on this letter. This is how they feel. The letter's signatories include Alan Albright, a district judge who hears a fourth of the nation's patent cases; Stephen Vaden, a former general counsel at the Department of Agriculture, who now sits on the United States Court of International Trade; and Matthew Kaczmarek, the district judge who suspended approval of the abortion drug mifepristone in a controversial ruling last year. Others are well-known district judges appointed by former President Donald Trump. While 12 judges joined the Yale boycott anonymously, Monday's letter marks the first time that more than 2 judges have said on the record that they will not hire graduates from an elite university. It also marks an about-face for Solomson, one of the letter's lead signatories who previously criticized the boycotts of Yale and Stanford as a form of collective punishment. His decision to spearhead the Columbia boycott underscores just how much goodwill the school has lost over the encampment, which effectively put the campus on lockdown. The letter, which comes 1 week after students occupied Columbia's main administrative building, Hamilton Hall, with support from faculty, argues that the rot has spread too deep for judges to hire from Columbia absent extraordinary change. It is likely to fuel debate about the value of an Ivy League degree, which, per a much-discussed prediction by statistics guru Nate Silver, is going to go down by a lot. Quote, recent events demonstrate that ideological homogeneity throughout the entire institution of Columbia has destroyed its ability to train future leaders of a pluralistic and intellectually diverse country, the judges write. If Columbia had been faced with a campus uprising of religious conservatives upset because they view abortion as a tragic genocide, we have no doubt that the university's response would have been profoundly different. You know, it's not justice when you don't treat all sides equally, when you favor one side is right and another side is wrong, and one side is justified and any opposite view to be unjustified. You either have to accept that as a judge, or you have to say, no, I'm not going to be involved with people that think this way, and they're certainly not going to work on any of my cases. Federal judges also have the opportunity to become distinguished while they're on the bench and then move into other positions. If they don't want to be associated with some kind of a woke agenda, social justice rather than actual equal justice under the law, then they can't hire these students. The letter marks a new front in the hellish public relations war that has consumed Columbia and cost it major donor capital. As the encampment drew throngs of outsiders to the university's doorstep, some of whom promised daily repeats of the October 7th attacks, pressure mounted on Shafik, the university's president, to lay down the law. She did not do so until April 30th, after nearly 5,000 alumni signed a petition demanding that the police clear Hamilton Hall. In the interim, Columbia lost one of its most prominent patrons, Robert Kraft, who said he could not in good conscience continue to donate to a school awash in virulent hate. Billionaires Leon Cooperman and Henry Suica have also cut ties with the university. The clerkship boycott represents one of the most extreme forms of outside pressure yet. It targets a key source of the university's prestige and could deter right-leaning high school seniors with an interest in law from applying to Columbia for college, at a time when some families are revisiting enrollment decisions amidst the unrest. Why would you go to Columbia, either as an undergraduate or someone that wants to go to their law school, if you know your opportunities are going to be limited? This is the biggest response from federal judges to campus unrest so far, and it looks like the response is only going to become greater. So if you're going to take on law as a career, why would you go to Columbia? Go anywhere but Columbia. Unlike the boycotts of Yale and Stanford, which apply only to the university's law schools, the moratorium on Columbia clerks extends to undergraduates as well. Quote, as judges who hire law clerks every year to serve in the federal judiciary, we have lost confidence in Columbia as an institution of higher education, the letter reads. Columbia has instead become an incubator of bigotry. I mean, if your business is I've got a law school and I promote people through my law school and I charge a lot for the degrees, you do need the prestige of being able to say, we are highly regarded as an important institution. If you want a good career, you must come to our law school or go to another one, but our law school is a great law school. We get you great opportunities. Look at where our graduates have gone on to get great careers and have great future opportunities. This is a pretty big hit, particularly to Columbia Law School, but it also damages Columbia's entire university because it really does attach a stigma to the school. Ho and Branch, the two judges, announced in 2022 that they would no longer hire clerks from Yale Law School, citing a string of incidents in which speakers were shouted down and students were threatened with discipline for exercising their free speech. They extended the boycott to Stanford after a mob of students shouted down their colleague Kyle Duncan with help from the law school's diversity dean. Both boycotts focused on administrators who Ho and Branch said had encouraged student radicalism and cultivated an ideological monoculture. At Columbia, by contrast, the protest's biggest boosters have come not from the administration, but from the faculty. Joseph Hawley, a classics professor who chairs a required first-year humanities course for all undergraduates, gave interviews from inside the encampment and said there was no evidence of anti-Semitism on Columbia's campus. Numerous faculty groups have condemned Shafik's decision to call the police, both at the start of the encampment to arrest protesters and last week to clear Hamilton Hall, with the university's chapter of American Association of University Professors calling for a vote of no confidence. In the history department alone, well over half the faculty signed a statement condemning the criminalization of the protest, which violated numerous laws and school rules. Quote, both professors and administrators are on the front lines of the campus disruptions, encouraging the virulent spread of anti-Semitism and bigotry, the judges write. Significant and dramatic change in the composition of its faculty and administration is required to restore confidence in Columbia. The boycott could spur that change by exploiting the logic of supply and demand. Clerkships are a coveted commodity among law students, And part of the selling point of elite law schools is that they help their students land one. Since there are far more conservative judges than there are conservative law students, law schools rely disproportionately on conservatives to boost their clerkship placements and prestige, a dynamic that confers significant leverage on the right side of the federal bench. While it's hard to measure the success of past boycotts, Yale Law School made a number of reforms in the years following Ho and Branch's pressure campaign. It hired 2 conservative law professors. Previously, the school employed 0, and announced that one of them, Keith Whittington, would launch a new center devoted to the study of academic freedom. Stanford also made noises about its commitments to open debate, parting ways with the diversity dean who had disrupted Duncan and requiring a cursory session on free speech for all law students. At Columbia, the judges are demanding serious consequences for the students and professors who participated in the encampment. Though the law school has promised to expel the occupiers of Hamilton Hall and suspend others for trespassing, it has been vague about the terms of those suspensions, which followed weeks after amnesty and extended deadlines as the university tried to negotiate with protest leaders. Some suspended students were also spotted at the encampment after they'd ostensibly been kicked off campus, including Kaimani James, the protest leader who declared that Zionists don't deserve to live. Another student, Aiden Parisi, who was suspended for hosting an unauthorized event with members of Palestinian terror groups, remained on campus for weeks after being told to leave. The judges suggest that the school's disciplinary actions have so far been inadequate. Quote, in recent years, citizens have been told that unlawfully trespassing on and occupying public spaces is a sufficient basis to warrant incarceration, the letter reads. So that same conduct should surely be sufficient to warrant lesser measures such as expulsion or termination. And from above the law, they are whining and complaining that yes, these federal judges actually do have a significant amount of power and they're not afraid to use it. Federal judges say they won't hire from Columbia, leveraging their public offices to bully an institution they don't like. There are over 100 campuses hosting protests right now. But those schools don't get cheap Google hits, so these principled conservatives are just mad at Columbia. Now, what these principled conservatives are doing is they're saying, look, you're trying to leverage the judgeships that we have. You're trying to take our position as federal judges and say, if you want the opportunity to work for federal judges, come to our elite and prestigious law school, Columbia Law School. Well, now the judges are saying, no, you're not going to be able to do that anymore because we don't trust you. We don't like how you've handled these protests, these encampments, these takeovers of administrative buildings, the fact that you actually have professors breaking the law. If you're going to permit that, we're not going to consider you a legitimate source of future law students. And then you can go sell your law school services to all of your radical students and professors, but we're not going to participate in it. They really don't like this. And 2 of these judges already had an effective pushback boycotting other law students in the past. From Fox News, Trump-appointed federal judges pledged boycott of Stanford students after intellectual terrorism scandal. Judge Ho said, our nation's law schools are supposed to make the world a better place. I worry they're making the world a worse place. Circuit Court judges appointed by former President Donald Trump plan to refuse hiring Stanford law graduates following a scandal in which students verbally harassed a federal judge who was brought in as a guest speaker. Judges for the U.S. Court of Appeals of the 5th and 11th Courts, Judge James Ho and Elizabeth Branch, announced they would not hire future Stanford students to clerk for them, similarly to what they did last year with Yale Law, the Washington Free Beacon reported. Quote, we're not teaching the basic terms of our democracy, Judge Ho said at a banquet for the Texas Review of Law and Politics. Our nation's law schools are failing this basic standard. Quote, I worry they're making the world a worse place, Judge Ho continued. It's not a coincidence that the worst disruptions typically occur at the worst schools when it comes to one critically important metric, intellectual diversity of the faculty and in the administration. Protests broke out on March 9th at Stanford when Judge Kyle Duncan, who serves on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, was invited to speak by a conservative organization called the Federalist Society. Students shouted at him, preventing him from delivering his planned talk. The students reportedly called Duncan scum, asked him sexual questions, and said, we hope your daughter gets assaulted. Judge Ho criticized Stanford for refusing to bring disciplinary actions against the students. Quote, the problem is that these rules aren't enforced. Students disrupt without consequence. Administrators tolerate or even encourage the chaos, he said. Is it really that close of a call, whether it's okay to call for someone to be assaulted? Do these future leaders not really have fair notice that they shouldn't ridicule a judge's sex life? I'm all for second chances, but I'm not a schmuck. Among the protesters' complaints was how Duncan refused to use a transgender sex offender's preferred pronouns in a 2020 opinion. Quote, "So what do we do about it?" Judge Ho said. Well, ask yourself this. What do elite law schools do when they conclude that institutions are failing them? Yale recently called for a boycott of the U.S. News and World Report, and numerous schools have followed suit. Well, imagine that every judge who says they're opposed to discrimination at Yale and Stanford takes the same path. Imagine they decide that until the discrimination stops, they will no longer hire from these schools in the future. How quickly do we think those schools would stop discriminating then? We will not hire any student who chooses to attend Stanford Law School in the future, Judge Ho concluded. Stanford's president ultimately apologized to Duncan to acknowledge that his speech was disrupted in ways that undermined his ability to deliver the remarks he wanted to give to audience members who wanted to hear them, as a result of the failure to ensure that the university's disruption policies were followed. The president of the Stanford Federalist Society, Tim Rosenberger, said, "A lot of us who worked very hard to get to Stanford are kind of feeling like suckers right now. But you get here, you experience this, you see there's a mob, there's a way you're expected to think. You might have thought the law school was to teach you how to deliberate with people and how to make an argument. But in fact, it turns out it's here to teach you how to think a very particular way, to hold a certain set of beliefs. And if you don't want to do that, then maybe these elite schools are not for you," he said. The only kind of response that's going to work is power. Power asserting itself and saying, okay, you will not work for me. I will not give you an opportunity within my ability to do that, within my discretion, within the law. If you violate the law and you try to use violence to force your opinions on society, no matter how important you think your opinions are, you can't use violence. If you use violence, you will lose your future careers. That's what this woke shutdown is all about. We're absolutely in a culture war right now, and it's good to see another small win. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.